video, we're going to look at all force morale and how that affects the game. And just to sort of teaser one of the last video on chain of command dice, I'm going to give myself a full chain of command dice for the purpose of this video. It will become apparent as to why later. So, what is force morale? A lot of games, you either win or lose the game by arbitrary victory points for this, capture this objective, etc. Or you kill all the opponent. And the game is predicated on you doing any of these tasks or you tabling your opponent. However, chain of command represents your men's will to fight. The best way of describing it is, imagine a full strength platoon that's gone to war and it's almost at its objective. It knows it's almost at, it doesn't know, you know it's almost at the objective because you're overviewing the battlefield from your God's eye view, and you know that there isn't anybody behind it. The enemy have overcommitted down on the left, and you know 2 more turns, that's it, drive up the centre, it's all mine, there's nothing he can do to stop me. So from your point of view as a wargamer, you know all this. But then put yourself down to the eyes of one of these little 28mm men. Now, I could at this point get the camera and put it down to this level, but you get the idea. We've all leaned down and the battlefield looks a lot different. From the point of view of one of these little dudes, the battlefield looks a hell of a lot different than it does from our point of view. What does that mean in the game? Well, imagine from his point of view, the events that he sees before he takes that objective. You know that the other side of the bush is the objective and that's it. But he doesn't know what's there, he can't see it. So he does know if there's enemy men waiting for him, if the enemy have got machine gunners in ambush, or whether there's mines or anything like that there yet. Okay? So he's unaware of that. It's blissfully blinkered like this, he doesn't know what's there. So he only knows what he can see. Now imagine a few things have happened. He looks across to his right and he sees because we've got Germans in front of us, he sees a Sherman tank barreling down past one of their jump off points in the game mechanics, but in reality they've overrun the the right flank and is encroaching back on maybe your command behind the lines. But they've seen that tank overrun the right flank, so that's going to shake them a little bit. They look round for their Panzerschreck team, and they find their Panzerschreck team's running away for some unknown reason. They don't know why it's running away. We know that what's happened is they've taken some shooting maybe, or they've seen somebody else run through them and they've got some shock and they've fallen back. But this little dude here doesn't know what's caused all that. So he sees his one anti-tank asset running away. You know that you've got in reserve, you've got a Pack 40 that you could pull out and you could blow that tank up. He doesn't know this. From his point of view, he looks around, sees a tank overrunning his right flank. He sees the Panzerschreck running away. You know, he knows his squad have fired their Panzerfaust, so they haven't got any of them spare. So he's very worried about that tank that's gone down his right flank. Then, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the squad leader gets shot. Now, it could have been a sniper, could have been a stray bullet from somewhere, but the squad leader gets shot. From your point of view as a gamer, it doesn't matter because these make their move, they go through the hedge, they've won the game. But from the point of view of this infantryman, that all this bad things, all this uncertainty has mounted up. And what that means in game terms is things like this cause your force morale to drop. And when it's in this blue zone, it's quite good. But as it drops further, you lose command dice, you lose the ability to order your men, you lose the ability to deploy your men, you lose a jump off point. And when it gets to naught, your platoon regardless of the rest of the battlefield situation, they think discretion is the best part of Valor and they leave. So that's what it represents. It represents the little 28mm bloke's view of the battlefield and how willing he is to carry on and press this engagement. Does he jump through that hedge knowing that he's going to win? Or does he look around and think, oh, well, actually, things don't look good, I don't want to be here? Now, in order to simulate this, first of all, you roll, as we said before, for your starting force morale. In this case, these Germans are very uncertain, and they start with a force morale of 8. At 8 force morale, we have 5 command dice as normal, and things looking good, and the game's going on ahead. But things can happen that can cause a loss of morale. If you bear with me 1 second, I left my cheat sheet the other side of the board. Because if I did it without the cheat sheet, I am bound to forget things. So what could cause these guys to give up the fight, to stop fighting? So you do what's known as a bad things happen check for certain things happening in the game. They are, for example, if a team breaks or is wiped out. So if these guys go, well, actually, we're all dead, or they run away, it's unlikely that a team as part of a section will run away on its own, okay? But it is likely that these may die. Say you got really unlucky or lucky and the enemy rolled a lot of 6s and they die. That's a bad thing happening. So a bad thing test, you roll the dice, and unlike a lot of dice rolls in wargaming, the higher, the worse it is. So for a team wiped out, on a 5, that would be a -1. So it would drop it down. As this is an indicator of this dude's or this dude's desire to carry on fighting, certain things at first seem some counterintuitive. So if I grab a team that may run away, so I'll grab the Panzerschreck team. Yeah. Now, this Panzerschreck team is on its own and is a separate team. Okay? So if I move these up, so you can see that they're separate. So we've got a separate Panzerschreck team. Now, if this takes 4 shock or more, it'll run. So this team could run away. And an interesting thing about this game is, on average, something running away causes these guys to want to fight less than these dying. Now, I know what you're thinking, that's a bit weird, but bear with me. If these guys run forward to kill a tank, for example, and die doing a heroic sacrifice for the fatherland, these guys are thinking, yeah, you know, look at Fritz and Hans, they were really brave. They died for their country, that's good. Well, that's not that bad. However, watching their Panzerschreck basically scream, cry, and run away, that's not very brave and glorious, and that could have a more disastrous effect for force morale. In fact, the difference for team is the worst you can get for team wiped out is -1, whereas the worst you can get for team breaks are -2, so it could have gone down an extra 1. So what else? If all these guys run away, that's a bad thing, and that's a very bad thing. That's very likely to be -2 to your force morale straight up. Yeah? If they're wiped out, it's a little bit more forgiving, but it could still be bad. This could still be -2. If you were to look at the table, effectively the difference would be if they break, a 1 or a 2 causes -1. Anything else, so 3 plus, -2. Whereas if they get wiped out, it's a 4 plus for a -2 and a 1, 2, or 3 for -1. So it's a marginal difference, but it's still there. What else could cause bad things? Well, as I said, their beloved squad leader getting shot. If he's wounded, that causes a bad thing. If he's killed, causes a worse bad thing. If he screams and runs off the board in ignominy, that's disastrous. That goes up to like -3. Okay, and that's just a junior leader. So it goes up to -2 for a junior leader. If it was a senior leader, so if it's a platoon sergeant, that also causes a bad thing. That's usually, again, worse because it's senior. Support, so if you've got any tanks, if you've got any artillery not artillery, anti-tank guns, armoured cars, medium machine guns, that sort of thing that you bought from the support list, that causes a bad thing to happen. If the enemy overrun a jump-off point, so if these Germans run up, if they get within 4, it shuts it down. If the turn ends, it's removed if they've run over it. That causes a bad thing because the enemy have basically overrun your position. If in a bigger game, so if you're playing like a massive game with multiple platoons, you lose for if a friendly platoon is damaged, and in a bigger game, you lose for individual tanks, depending on the tanks. But they're for bigger games, they're not in on this. So a curious thing to note is tanks. We'll discuss this further when we talk about tanks, but there's 2 ways a tank can be destroyed. Well, 3 ways. It can retreat off the board, which is negligible. It could bail out, or it could blow up. If it bails out, you have a bad thing happening, obviously, because you've lost the support choice. If it blows up, you've lost the support choice, and you've lost the junior leader that's in it as well, because it's blown up. So that's 2 bad things for that tank going up. So all these things effectively diminish your ability to fight. Now, the interesting thing about this, let's say we were on 8, okay? And let's grab, where's the leader? There's the leader. And we charged all this mess into one of those bloody combats that we saw in the last video, okay? And we got a bit carried away. We charged the defended position that had 2 machine guns in it. We got mauled. Let's say, however, we were reasonably lucky. And we have some survivors. So we'll take 2 off that squad, 3 off that squad, right? But we lost the senior leader. He was wounded. So he is in that squad. But we've also got now 7 shock on them. Okay? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys with 7 shock. So they're pinned. So they're like half firepower, can't move again. But that alone on bad things happening is a loss of a senior leader. And as he's killed, we'll take him off. That's going to, on average, cause 2. So it's, you lose 1 for a 1 and 3 for a 6. So let's say he loses 2. So it's dropped us down to 6. But these are pinned and they're in the open. You know, they're not in a very good position. Now let's see what happens when the Americans have a turn and they shoot back. Now let's say they kill 1 guy from that squad and they put another 2 shock on it. So they were on 7 shock, they're now on 9 shock with only 4 guys. So they break. But let's say that the Americans got lucky and that 1 dead was an officer and these have broken. Now that is going to be a section breaks, so that may be another -2 dice. Okay? And the junior leader's killed, so that's going to be another -1. So they've now dropped from 5 command dice to 3 command dice, just through this overextension of 1 squad with a supporting officer. So it's something when you play the game to bear in mind is this force morale doesn't only plummet when you lose your entire army. If you overextend a few valuable assets and they get mauled and you get a bit unlucky with some dice rolls, that is going to have a disastrous effect on your ability to win the game. Okay? And if you think of it from a realistic point of view, you've got a platoon of men that have trained together, maybe have fought together in multiple theatres, and all of a sudden A squad has just advanced and they're not there anymore. They've been decimated, the survivors are running, screaming. Squad B and C are unlikely to want to advance at that point. Okay? And trying to get the entire sort of carnival it's now become, the chaos back under control, is going to be difficult, which is going to be represented by these -2 dice. Likewise, if you've gone down one more, you lose a jump-off point, so you lose one of your deployment points, which represents, actually, we don't really want to advance, we want to consolidate what we've got and hope. So, when this gets to naught, regardless of whether you've done the mission or not, or whatever's going on, unless there's campaign-specific rules to the contrary, that's it. It's game over. Your men don't want to fight anymore. So, managing force morale is quite important to this game. So, as we've discussed before when we're talking about command dice, junior leaders can remove shock from the teams they're assigned, they're basically leading directly, they're associated with. Yeah. They can remove shock from other teams in their section. So not the one that, so if you have a section that sort of was a bit strung out, maybe, where's the rest of my dudes? I pulled them all off. Oh, okay, so you got the machine gun section there. You've got the rifle section over here. These two are still within 4 inches of each other, but it's clear that this senior officer, this junior leader is assigned to this team, not that team, yeah, then he could take shock off this team if it was out of sight of the enemy, but mainly you don't want to do that. You want to keep him somewhere, because if you're within sight of the enemy, you can only take shock off the teams you're attached to, okay? Like, senior leader's got 9-inch range, so if the enemy wasn't in sight, back here, he could take shock off both of them, but if the enemy could see them, he'd have to be up risking basically being shot. So if you think about it, if you're under direct fire, you know, the sergeant hiding behind a wall behind you, just out of sight, going, go on, you can do it, you're not likely to listen. But if he's leading you from the front, you go, come on, you can do it, and risking himself, it's more likely to actually have an effect. So that's one way of managing it, because you really don't want your squads being pinned, and you definitely don't want them breaking. If they're pinned, they remain pinned until the end of the turn. Remember when we talk about the command dice 3 6s ends a turn. A chain of command dice could also end a turn, but you remain pinned until the turn ends, okay? And then when the turn ends, if you've rallied some shock off, so you've got less shock than the number of models you've got, so you wouldn't be pinned, then you rally and you're not pinned. Same as if you're breaking, if you're running away at the end of the turn, if you've rallied the shock off, the men come back into the fray. If you haven't, they've gone, and then you have a bad thing happening because they've broke and they've routed. Okay? So that's one way of sort of managing this. The other way is a chain of command dice. Now we're going to talk about these in a separate video, but one of the things you could do with the chain of command dice is not roll for the bad thing happen. So let's say our senior leader got killed. That's a bad thing happening. I can go, actually, you know, like say I was 5 on the force morale check. I don't want that to get any worse. So instead of rolling, I use that dice and I ignore the bad thing happening. Okay? I would have rolled a 2, which in this case, for a senior leader killed, would have been -1. I would have lost a dice. For a senior leader killed, I was looking at losing a dice anyway, so it was worth using this chain of command dice for. So that's how force morale works. It's a very good aspect of the game. Managing it is vital, and it's very easy to get complacent, think you're winning, overextend, and as I said, all it takes is you to maybe you know, imagine you've advanced into one of those disastrous combats that we saw, and you had 2 senior leaders in there. That's it. That, you know, that could have broke your team. Because imagine from the point of view of something like, say, Band of Brothers, you've sent a squad out, and your platoon sergeant, and so Lipton and Winters maybe, or somebody has got out in there, and they've both been shot. You're unlikely to want to continue to advance at that point. So that's managing that is vital to success in this game. We've had a few battles where, it looks as if one side's going to win. I mean, my last game, I basically lost the game by a disastrous combat, having knock-on effects on my force morale. And as, obviously, these dice drop, your chances of winning are getting a lot slimmer, because 5 command dice, you're okay. You know, you can do most things. When you get down to here, so you're down to 3 command dice, it's very hard to motivate you. I mean, theoretically, you could have lost sections, which means it's easier to order. But you may have just got loads of wounded officers. So it diminishes your ability to do things as well. So you ideally want to stay in this range, and you don't want to overextend. It's why in a lot of scenarios, if you're the defender, deploying on the board in piecemeal isn't necessarily a good thing, because you give the enemy a target and they can whack this morale down before you get sufficient firepower on the board, and then it's bad. Like I said, from one section getting mauled, that can have such a detriment, especially if you start around 8. I mean, if you start around 11, if you start on 11, so you're rolled a 6, you could be a little bit more complacent. But if you're rolled an 8, you can't make any mistakes like that at all. So that's force morale. In the next video, we'll be looking at tanks, firing at tanks, tanks shooting, and then we'll finish it all up with a look at the chain of command dice. So thanks for watching. Hope you're learning how to play what is a great World War II game. I'll catch you on the next video.